Hello and welcome to Tête à Tête, France 24's flagship interview show. Our guest this week is Dmytro Kuleba. He was Ukraine's foreign minister between 2020 until last September. Thank you very much for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
You're an associate professor now at the Paris School of International Affairs in Sciences Po. Thank you for your time. Since you left, Donald Trump came back to the White House, and according to everything we're seeing since his return, one thing seems clear: Vladimir Putin has won the war in Ukraine.
Not yet, but his today's counterpart in the White House is definitely closer to Putin in the understanding of how the world should be arranged and run than President Biden. But no, I wouldn't say that everything is predetermined. Has Ukraine's position worsened? It did, but does it mean that we lost the war? No, we are far away from that.
Obviously, Ukraine a few months ago took control of certain territory inside Russia in the Kursk region. This now seems to be back in Russian hands. Was it a good strategy to go there in hindsight?
I think inflicting damage on your enemy who tries to destroy you is a good strategy under any circumstances. And back then, Ukraine's success in the Kursk region restored faith in Ukraine's capability to undertake such operations, exposed Putin's vulnerability and weakness. So it had positive impact. But this is the war. You gain, you lose. The outcome of the war is always judged in the end, not in the middle of it. So we have to keep defending ourselves and seek new ways of making life of Russia more difficult.
But do you think we're nearing the end of the war under the terms imposed by Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, that would start with a ceasefire, but also Ukraine making significant territorial concessions to Russia?
I don't understand the notion of significant territorial concession. If something,
20%,
if something belongs to you, then losing even the tiniest part of it is significant. It's not land is like human life. It cannot be seen through the lens of significant or insignificant. But I would like to emphasize once again, I do not have the impression that we are nearing the end of the war. This is not the feeling I have. We may be moving towards the ceasefire, but I wouldn't say that we are close to it. And ceasefire does not mean the end of the war. I'm afraid there's everything we know from history is that wars end when one of the sides accepts that it is incapable to reach its goals. And we are not there yet, neither on the Russian nor on Ukrainian side.
You don't think that Vladimir Putin would be satisfied with controlling Crimea, the Donbass? That would not be enough for him? This is the assumption in the White House right now.
Well, yes, there are two schools of thought here, and some believe that it's enough to give Putin a piece of land and Ukraine's neutrality, and he will accept that. But everything we know about President Putin and his 10 years of aggression against Ukraine is that he came after a whole of Ukraine and not a part of it. So
it's a mistake.
Yes, I think this is the fundamental mistake. The fundamental mistake is to believe that you can give a finger to Putin so that he does not bite off the entire hand. But some believe so, and they will have to learn their painful lesson about that.
In addition to possible territorial concession, one thing now clearly seems off the table, it was already maybe off the table, is NATO membership for Ukraine. How damaging would that be?
Well, it is not that half a year ago under President Biden, Ukraine was promised to become a NATO member anytime soon. Yes. So the difference between Biden and Trump is that Trump openly said what President Biden thought. It's unfortunate. He conceded a very important card in negotiations if he was to perceive it from that perspective. But there is nothing dramatically new in it. If we know anything about NATO issue, is that it can re-emerge at any given moment, depending on circumstances. And this is why President Putin does not believe in a promise, even in a statement, that Ukraine's NATO membership is out of the question. He takes it very rationally. He says, okay, today it's out of the question, but who will give me the guarantee that it will not be back on the agenda tomorrow? And of course, no one can give that guarantee to him.
Right. When you saw this incident in the White House, Vladimir Zelensky being berated by President Trump, Vice President Vance, and so on, were you surprised, or do you think this was by accident, or this was actually a setup to probably please Vladimir Putin?
Well, there are divergent opinions on whether this was staged and Zelensky was ambushed or things just ran out of control.
What is your opinion?
I believe things ran out of control. Vice President Vance definitely and deliberately escalated against President Zelensky. And everything else that followed was three strong men in one room who preferred to express themselves instead of tempering their emotions. So what is important, it is important to note, though, that 12 days after President Trump was praising President Zelensky and Ukrainian and American diplomats who issued a joint statement speaking about Ukraine's agreement to the 30 days ceasefire. So we should understand that with President Trump, things can change over day. Today he hates you, tomorrow he accepts you as a good partner, and he can hate you again after tomorrow. So things should be seen in the process and not in the process, in their continuity, and not in isolated incidents.
You say President Trump says what President Biden thought. Did President Biden think Vladimir Zelensky was a dictator?
No, definitely not. I want to be very clear about it. I compared to them on only one issue, which is NATO membership, but it does not mean that their thinking is aligned. Actually, they are as different as two human beings can be on the rest of the issues on the political agenda.
Do you think what happened in the White House is maybe a blessing for Europe, at least, if not for Ukraine, that Europe is now trying to figure out how to defend itself? Maybe it could take action on Ukraine. What could it do to help Ukraine concretely? Sending weapons? Not enough, clearly, but confiscate Russian assets. What would you advise Europe to do now?
Well, if J.D. Vance's address to Europe at the Munich Security Conference was not enough to wake up, then definitely the incident in the Oval Office was a clear blessing, as you said it. And I must credit European leaders for getting the message right and expediting their decisions and strengthening their resolve to act to defend Europe. Europe can do a lot of things, but the question that matters is time. Europe needs to act fast.
That's rather unusual.
Exactly, and this is my only concern. Resolve is clearly there. Resolve to act is clearly there. All the necessary decisions were made by the European Council, so this box is also ticked. Now Europe has to be fast in implementing these decisions, and EU record on the pace of movement is mixed. Let me put it this way. But we hope that the sense of urgency will give this impetus and push and motivation to deliver, because, as I said, Europe has all the capabilities. Some of them, the only three things that Europe cannot do in short-term perspective are delivering Patriot interceptors, spare parts for American maintenance for American equipment and intelligence. But on everything else, you have the factories, you have technologies, you can cooperate with Ukraine. We can do a lot together to put Ukraine and Europe in a much stronger position vis-a-vis Putin and Trump.
Just as a last question, you experienced this as a foreign minister. Do you have one regret in terms of during the war when you think there was maybe an opening to stop all this, or never?
No, I don't think there was a given kind of moment when things should have been done differently. But if I look back in retrospective, of course, I have to admit that Ukraine was in the strongest position in the end of 2022, amidst the successful counter-offensive in the east and the south and liberation of Kherson. And unfortunately, partners did not provide Ukraine with additional weapons and equipments to continue with this counteroffensive. And unfortunately, Ukraine did not have sufficient amount of its own resources to keep pushing the Russians back. So
Ukraine could have won the war.
We could have liberated many more territories back then. We could have put Ukraine in the strongest position possible for negotiations with Russia and end the war back then. But because of the lack of capability to produce more weapons and form more brigades internally, and the lack of deliveries from the outside, this momentum was lost, and everything else is history.
Dmytro Kuleba, I want to thank you very much for being our guest here on France 24, and thank you all for watching this show.